Good morning. Welcome to Second Unitarian Church. I'm Susan Heyer, a member of the church's Board of Trustees, and my pronouns are she, her, hers. In response to COVID-19, we at 2U are doing our part in slowing the spread of the coronavirus. We are continuing to meet virtually using Zoom. You will notice that there is a chat feed available for you to interact with, and you're welcome to use this to say hello to one another and share your joys and concerns when we reach that time in the service. When we would traditionally sing together and read things in unison, you're encouraged to do so as well, even though you are on mute. Our voices echo through the world, so we might just hear one another if we listen closely and sing with our full spirit. As things continue to change, we will be paying close attention to the recommendations of public health officials and respond as quickly as possible. At this time, we recognize physical distancing as an act of love and protection. We especially welcome newcomers this morning. During this time of pandemic, finding a new community and making new connections can be challenging. Please know that we're excited to have you and look forward to getting to know you. If you're new to us today, you're welcome to note that in our chat feed. Following service today, all children's religious education classes are happening. If you would like to register your child for classes, please reach out to Alicia Obando. Our worship today is led by Reverend Jason Lydon, along with worship associate Kate Friedloeb and Chalice Leiter-Jobson. Our music is provided by Carl Kennedy, Harris McKee, Jim Redlick, and Myra Epping, and Alexa Gray. Our tech team are Christy Grant, Dan Ashley, Harris McKee, John Hook, and David Martin. I have a couple of announcements for you this morning. Our social justice ministry team is meeting on Tuesday evening over Zoom at 7 p.m. All are welcome, and all are welcome at this and every monthly social justice ministry meeting. We are striving to reduce the siloing of our justice work as a church. The role of our social justice ministry is to facilitate congregational engagement with social justice rather than act for justice as a lone committee. All members are welcome. Please reach out to April Neander or Barb Michael if you have questions. As you may have seen, our music director, Amanda Thomas, is on leave until February 28th. Carl Kennedy is our acting music director during this time. We wish Amanda all the best during this requested leave time and will welcome her back with great love on March 1st. You can find more information and additional announcements in your order of service. I now welcome Kate Friedloeb to lead our call to worship.
We are a Unitarian Universalist congregation, a community of children, youth, and adults, a people of many beliefs and traditions, bound not by the specific list of things we believe, but by the values we share. Whether you are joining us for the first time or the 1000th time, you are welcome here. Whether you believe in God some of the time, all of the time, or none of the time, you are welcome here. Whatever your race, whomever you love, whichever way you move in the world, however much money you have in your pocket, you are welcome here. I invite you now to take a breath in and out. As the music begins, let us enter into our worship together.
Thank you, Carl. That was beautiful. In just a moment, Jobson will light our chalice, the symbol of our faith. We light our chalice this morning with these, what I imagine are familiar words. They're some of my favorites from the late, great Audre Lorde. She says, "When I dare to be powerful, to use my strength in service of my vision, then it becomes less and less important whether I am afraid."
Please join us in singing hymn number 1008, When Our Heart is in a Holy Place.
Me in reciting our words of covenant. The words are on your screen. We covenant to build a community that challenges us to grow and empowers us to honor the truth within ourselves. We will be generous with our gifts and honest in our communication, holding faithful to a love that embraces both diversity and conflict. Called by our living tradition, we will nurture spirituality within a vision of the eternal, living out our inner convictions through struggles for justice and acts of compassion.
Please join me in singing our congregational hymn, Spirit of Life. Spirit of life, come unto me. Sing in my heart all the stirrings of compassion blow in the wind, rise in the sea, move in the hand, giving life of justice. Roots hold me close, wings set me free. Spirit of life, come to me, come to me.
Thank you, Harris, and thank you to everyone being patient as we figure out our tech things together. Now is our time for all ages. So if your children are not with you at this moment, this would be a great time for them to come and join you. I want to tell you a story this morning about a tiger. This is a story that I first heard from the Unitarian Universalist minister, Reverend Christopher Buse. And the story goes like this. There once was a beautiful, fierce, strong, and powerful tiger. And she was living in the jungle, going about her time. But one day, a man came and captured her and put her in a cage. Oops, but she gets to stay standing up in her cage. The man said to this beautiful tiger, "You now, tiger, belong to me." And the tiger was stuck in the cage. Now, the man was responsible for keeping care, at least basic care, of this tiger. And so each day he would bring her some water and put some water into her cage with her. And she would look at her face and think, my goodness, am I a beautiful, beautiful tiger? And the man, though, he would lie to her and say, no, 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 tiger. You are not beautiful. You are an ugly tiger. So unkind. But the tiger, hearing this, thought to herself, well, maybe he is right. And the man would go about his day, and then he came back and would give some food, just kind of keeping her alive. And she thought, as she paced back and forth in her cage, I am strong. I might not be beautiful, but I am strong and powerful. And the man said, no, tiger, you are not. You are not strong and powerful. You are weak. And the tiger thought to herself, oh, well, my goodness, maybe I am weak. And off the man went. But one day, the tiger noticed out in the distance a beautiful, powerful lion who was walking around, and the lion stopped by the cage and said, oh my goodness, tiger, you are beautiful. What are you doing in this cage? And the tiger said, oh no, I am not beautiful. For she had heard these lies she'd been told so many times. And the lion said, well, I think you are so beautiful. Not only do I think you are beautiful, but I know you are strong too. And the tiger thought to herself, no, and shared out loud, no, I am not. I'm not powerful. And the lion said, yes, I know, tiger, that you are a very powerful tiger. And you don't need to be in this cage anymore. And the lion, I want you to come and join me. Let us be free together. Maybe you can feel your power inside of you. Feel your strength and maybe get yourself free. And the tiger started pacing back and forth, and she was getting stronger and feeling stronger, and the cage started to rattle. And it rattled some more, and it fell over because there wasn't even a lock on it. And she got out and she said, I am powerful. I am beautiful. And she and the lion together were celebrating their beauty and strength as big cats, knowing that indeed they could get free from the lies that were being told to them. And the tiger, her friend, her new friend, the lion, she too would begin to feel the confidence of her power. And off they went, free from the man. That story is about the power we each have within us, even when other people might tell us it's not there. There are so many ways we are taught about who has power and who doesn't. This tiger came to believe that her power that was so strong and real within her wasn't what it really was. Taught lies by the man who kept her in a cage. And really, so many of us have to get through our own cages that tell us we're not good enough, beautiful enough, popular enough, strong enough, smart enough. But I know that just like the tiger, you, we, all of us are powerful. So I hope that you enjoy your week, and when you have your classes this afternoon, that you enjoy reflecting together on what you're learning in your classes. Enjoy the rest of your Sunday. While our times for all ages are designed for children, I hope that all of us, whatever our ages, can hear the messages within them. Each year, we all in our church make a commitment, a pledge to support the ministry of our church. In addition to this contribution, each Sunday we take a collection so that we can share with those who are doing justice work beyond our walls. While we are unable to come together in person right now, we can still share our resources. In just a moment, there will be a phone number on your screen, and you can text and follow all of the prompts to make your contributions. For the month of January, we are sharing our offertory with the Jane Addams Senior Caucus. And this morning, we'll hear some words from the Executive Director, Lori Clark.
Morning. My name is Lori Clark. I'm the director of Jane Addams Senior Caucus. It's so nice to be here with you today. I know many of you know that we share members, both Jane Addams Senior Caucus and Second Unitarian, the Fleischmans, Judy Carabelli, Linda and Norm Grotzinger, Dick Scheiberly, Nana Cross, Nikki Smith, Jim Simonis, and countless others. But today I'm going to talk about one member, a longtime member of both Jane Addams Senior Caucus and Second Unitarian Church. It is Gene Horker, beloved Gene Horker. As you know, Gene lives his values of to you and your covenant through his work at Jane Addams Senior Caucus. And Jane Addams Senior Caucus is a movement of organized seniors who are moving out of the shadows and leading the fight for a world where seniors, our families, and our communities thrive and are valued, where government protects the vulnerable and invests in our greatest challenges. And Gene was called to act by the rising inequality. He was called to act by the unparalleled power of the nursing home and housing industry. He was called to act by the realities of low-income seniors and the ongoing legacy of racism. And Gene Horker and members of Jane Addams Senior Caucus understood that seniors in our communities could no longer wait. Gene was a member of our healthcare team, and he fought for a community care program that provided seniors with home care workers and services so that they could live in their own homes with their loved ones with the appropriate services. He fought with members of Jane Addams Senior Caucus to ensure that home care workers received a living wage. And Gene Horker fought with Jane Addams Senior Caucus members the toughest fight to ensure that there was nursing home reform in Illinois. And Gene did it in many ways. He did it by organizing many of you to write letters to your senators and state representatives. He did it by going to legislators' offices and meeting with them. And he did it by doing civil disobedience. And I'm going to share the first story of Gene doing civil disobedience. As many know, civil disobedience is also an act of self-preservation, and it's an act of political warfare. And we understood that the nursing home industry was way too powerful and was not doing, oh, okay, thank you. I just realized someone told me it was 3 minutes. So I am gonna wrap up and say, if Gene was here with me, he would have been much more concise. And he would say to you, thank you for your commitment to justice. And thank you for your commitment to Jane Addams Senior Caucus. And thank you for your generosity. Thank you.
Now I invite you to join me in reading our offertory words. The words are printed in your order of service and are on the screen. This church is a community of ourselves. Its energy and resources are our energy and resources. Its wealth is what we share. As we contribute to the life of this community, we affirm it and enable its participation in the larger world around us. The offering will now be generously given and gratefully received.
I want to invite you now, wherever it is that you are, to join me in the spirit of prayer or meditation. Let us begin by breathing together. Try to release the tension in your neck. Relax the muscles in your shoulders. Allow your jaw to relax. And breathe. We begin in thanks. Thankful for the breath in our lungs, the beauty of our earth, and the strength of this community. We hold in our hearts those who care for family in ill health, those who live with grief or chronic pain, those struggling with addiction or illness, seen and unseen. We are with you. for parents and teachers, thinking especially this morning about the CTU, Chicago Teachers Union teachers, and all those whose primary spiritual practice is caring for children, especially now during the challenges of pandemic. We are with you. We pray for our neighbors in prison, including those in Illinois who finally are getting access to the vaccine. For those who are struggling to stay afloat in the midst of poverty, we are with you. Pray for all those living in harm's way. Pray for our planet and commit to work that will lead us away from the harms of climate chaos. We pray that wisdom, compassion, and empathy guide the leaders of our world. May they and we be instruments of a just and lasting peace. Our lives are truly blessed by those who knowingly, with curiosity and courage, face their final days. For those who are still locked today in concentration camps at the border, held in cages and inhumane conditions, for those in ICE detention centers right here in Chicago, we are with you and commit to doing more. Into this shared silence that we hold, I invite you now to speak the name of anyone you wish to lift up into the loving support of our community. With our deepest compassion, let us hold in our hearts those named and unnamed, those remembered and those forgotten. Let it be so. Amen, and blessed be. In just a moment, I will light 2 candles, one representing those joys and celebrations that we are going through right now, and another representing those sorrows and struggles that we are also navigating. As the music plays, I invite you to share your joys, celebrations, concerns, and sorrows in our chat window. We hold all of these, our shared joys and concerns, close to our hearts. Kate Friedlob, would you share our first reading, please?
Our first reading is a poem from Mary Oliver entitled, Mysteries, Yes. Truly, we live with mysteries too marvelous to be understood. How grass can be nourishing in the mouths of the lambs. How rivers and stones are forever in allegiance with gravity, while we ourselves dream of rising. How two hands touch and the bonds will never be broken. How people come from delight or the scars of damage to the comfort of a poem. Let me keep my distance always from those who think they have the answers. Let me keep company always with those who say, look, and laugh in astonishment and bow their heads.
Thank you, Kate. Our second reading this morning is from an interview with the author, educator, sometimes preacher, Eric Liu, after the publication of his book, You're More Powerful Than You Think. These are his words. There are 3 laws of power that I write about in the book, he says. Number 1, that power concentrates. Number 2, that power is always justifying itself with explanations of why the people who are in power ought to be in power. And if we just had those 2 laws, we'd be stuck in a pretty dim loop. But what saves us is law number 3, which is that power is infinite. Here again, I know this so cuts against the grain of the thinking of the sophisticated people who read democracy. It sounds a little bit naive. It sounds new agey, but I mean it concretely in this sense. In civic life, it is possible to generate power out of thin air, where it did not exist before, simply, as if this could be simple, by organizing. This is obvious to people involved in grassroots politics, but it is completely not obvious to tens of millions of bystanders of American democratic life who have been observing and spectating, but have never stepped onto the field themselves. The current allocation of power is not fixed or finite. If you learn how to organize your neighbors, give a great public speech, use social media, develop memes to stir up interest in a cause, you haven't diminished at all my ability to do those things. All you have done is you've added to the net amount of power in civic life. That's a point I really want to underscore. One of the things we've got to do in this moment is restore some fundamental faith that it's possible for us in 2s and 3s by starting clubs and organizing to begin to heal the body politic. Let us hear our anthem. The energy of that song is still pulsing in me. I want you to take a minute, search your memory for a moment when you felt powerful. Find a time in your mind when you knew you had power. I'll give you some time. For some of us, this is easier than it is for others of us. As you take notice of this memory, look around at the scene you're creating in your mind. What about this moment makes you feel powerful? Are there other people around? Are you somewhere familiar? Are you using your voice or your body? Where does this power you are feeling come from? Take a moment. Close your eyes if you want to. Take some breaths as you uncover your answers to each question. As you do this, I wonder if you might even start feeling some of that power again. Unitarian Universalist minister Dr. Marilyn Sewell has an essay entitled Power, and in it offers these words. In and of itself, power is neither good or evil, she writes. It is morally neutral. It can be used for nefarious ends, or it can be used to heal and to bring justice. The direction it takes depends on the spiritual maturity of the one who wields the power and the purpose for which it is used. As you consider the scene you just had in your mind, for which purpose were you using your power? As you consider your own power, how might your Unitarian Universalism influence the way that you exercise power? So, beloveds, I want to share with you that this Sunday is my third attempt at making the focus of my sermon a bit of an abstract question about power. There were 2 other Sundays when I thought we would reflect on power together, the nature of power, but both times I changed my mind. I did so not because there was a lack of things to be reflected on, but because I was not exactly sure what I wanted to say. I've spent countless hours in the streets at protests chanting about people power. I've written so many letters to policymakers about the way I wish they would enact and use their power. I've also spent many hours in AA meetings listening to people talk about their higher power, however they understand that. I also volunteered for 7 years at a domestic violence organization, hearing about the harms of abusive power in interpersonal romantic relationships. And so as I stand before you this morning, I expect, honestly, to offer more questions and observations about power than I expect to offer answers. Our readings this morning are purposefully so different from one another. First, we heard the poetry of Mary Oliver bringing us into connection with the beauty of nature, as she does so well. Then she invites us to practice both wonderment and humility. It is with this curiosity that she encourages as well as with a healthy dose of doubt, that I am approaching my reflections to power this morning. Poetics are not the only part of my approach this morning. Our second reading came from Eric Liu. Liu's writing is not poetry at all, but rather his own understanding of the laws that shape and govern power. Though his laws are not simply legalese, no, instead, Liu cultivates imagination in his defining. If power is not fixed or finite, as he says, then truly the definitions are contestable. Nothing fits better within Unitarian Universalism than a set of guidelines that we can then mess around with, continue to contest, and possibly even reshape together. So it is in this spirit of questioning that I find myself, and I hope you will join me here. In preparation for this sermon, I had a lengthy call with my dear friend Heike, who is a professor of political theory at the University of Massachusetts in Boston. Before we scheduled our call, I had sent her a text that I thought was pretty simple. I texted, "Do you have favorite definitions of power?" She responded back almost immediately, "LOL, all caps." I smiled, wondering what else might come after. And just a minute later, my phone vibrated again with this: "You are the absolute queen at asking big questions via text message, questions that couldn't possibly be even close to answered in this limited form," she texted back to me. Well, okay then, I thought. And Heike's not wrong. Part of the problem for me, and I imagine for some of you as well, is that I would like simpler answers to some of these massive questions. I think the desire to look at both big questions while also having concrete answers is part of why I entered the ministry. While we certainly strive to answer giant questions together in church life, we also work to meet immediate needs and love on each other as best as we can, right here, right now. As Unitarian Universalists, we are called to constantly balance the big questions with the immediate needs. Holding two things or even more at once is central to our religious tradition. We honor the beauties of both reason and mystery, theistic and non-theistic theologies, constantly recommitting to a both and religious practice, rather than an either or. While disappointed that there was not a simple answer to be received, I was thrilled that Heike was willing yet again to spend a significant amount of time on the phone with me just discussing power. As a political theorist, Heike offered me many perspectives on power. The most important part of the conversation, though, was the clarity that there is absolutely not one single definition of power, and that people in the same fields do not necessarily agree with one another about what power even is. Yes, there are definitions of power in Webster Dictionary, but despite the omnipresence of Webster, a dictionary definition, alas, is not the end of the conversation. It would make things simpler if they were, certainly. Heike, though, might suggest that the impossibility of a universal definition of power is precisely what power is all about. So I am not a political theorist, and to the best of my knowledge, we are not a congregation filled with political theorists. And yet the conversations happening about power in politics have an enormous impact on all of us. During our conversation, Heike rattled off for me definitions of power from Robert Dahl, Hannah Arendt, Karl Marx, Thomas Hobbes, Baruch Spinoza, John Locke, and Michel Foucault. I'd be curious if any of these theorists have specific influence on you. My guess is that most of us have not read all of them, or maybe even the majority of them, in depth. And given that we don't have the hour-plus time that Heike spent with me, I'm not going to share a multitude of definitions with you, but instead offer my very flawed Cliff's Notes. So for Hobbes, power is the ability to get what you want. For Spinoza, power is the ability to be affected, with an A, by others. For Locke, power is about the capacity to enforce punishment. For Dahl, power is the ability to influence others. And so it might not be surprising to some of you, but I connected most with Foucault's concepts of power. Power as a relationship. I want to quote him directly for you. Power is relations. Power is not a thing, he writes. It is a relationship between two individuals such that one can direct the behavior of another or determine the behavior of another. When Foucault writes about two individuals, he does not simply mean two people like me and David, who's right here with me. You might even be able to think of our church as one individual, and then the city of Chicago as another. As we're doing our visioning work and imagining our future together, part of what we're imagining is what is the power of our church in the city? What is our relationship to our community? We've been here in this building that I'm standing in on West Barry since 1906 in a constantly changing relationship to the community and world around us. Political theory, though, is certainly not the only place we talk about power in our lives. When the lights go off following a storm, we reckon not only with the power of the wind, but we also exclaim to one another, "Oh no, the power is out." Power gets used to describe forces of nature, the currents of electricity, and even the drive of creatures to survive. Language of power flows throughout science. My brother-in-law's fiance, Abby, is an astrophysicist. She also shared some of her wisdom with me as I was working on this sermon. You'll notice I just talked to lots of people before I figure out what it is I'm going to say. She was very patient with my complete lack of knowledge about physics. She shared with me that power is understood in physics as the rate at which work is done, or as a simple equation, power equals work over time. I remain somewhat confused about what constitutes work in physics. I know that we have some physicists in our congregation who might be able to help me out with that sometime. But again, here we see that definitions of power are not always so clear. We use the word power constantly as a people, though like with many conversations, it would probably be helpful if we handed one another a glossary of terms before we even began talking. Alas, this seems highly unlikely, though with most of us carrying a mini computer with us everywhere we go, it might not end up being that unrealistic. But short of creating a glossary of terms for ourselves and one another, my hope is that within this, our congregation, we can commit to simply checking in with one another about what we might mean when we talk with words that have so many varying meanings. I hope that we can continue to practice building trust with one another and commit to being curious as much as possible rather than judgmental. The more we practice listening, truly listening to one another, the easier this practice becomes. The more we listen, the easier it may be for us to understand our own and one another's power. Some of the times we most clearly understand power is when we exercise our own power to make choices in our personal lives. We make the choice to speak up, maybe to tell a crush that we like them, to live into our authentic gender, to stay alive even when it seems impossible, to get help when we need it, to try experimental therapies. The list of how we use our power is seemingly endless. While I may not be 100% sure about a definition of power, I have no doubt that each one of you is powerful and that we are powerful together. So as I continue to reflect on power this week, I turned to more poetry. In addition to the beauty of rigorous intellectual study, our emotional, spiritual, and intuitive understandings of power are also essential. Answers to the question of power extends out to science, political theory, art, theology, and more. If Foucault is right that power is about relationship, then power is indeed everywhere at all times, because what is existence if not so many relationships? Poet Naria Wahid offers this short poem. Knowing your power is what creates humility. Not knowing your power is what creates insecurity. Emily Dickinson, a century and a half ago, gave us this poem. To be alive is power, existence in itself without a further function, omnipotence, enough. To be alive and will, 'tis able as a God, the maker of ourselves. Be what? Such being, finitude. Just this last week, Amanda Gorman offered us a poem at the inauguration, and within it were these stanzas. This is an era of redemption, she told us. We feared at its inception, we did not feel prepared to be the heirs of such a terrifying hour. But within it, we found the power to author a new chapter, to offer hope and laughter to ourselves. Humility, finitude, and hope all become parts of what we can understand as power when we listen to poets. Power need not be exercised solely as power over. The relationship of power can be shared, mutually beneficial, and just. If you had a greater sense of your own power, how might you feel more secure and practice humility? If you acted in your relationships with awareness of your power, how might you become together? If you found your power, maybe not like a superhero being bitten by a radioactive spider, but like all of us seeking hope and possibility, what might you be able to do? Surely we know that power is not simple or simply metaphorical. There are material effects of power. We know about the power of oppression and injustice. We also know about the power of the people to rise up. We know about the power of climate chaos. We also know about the power of survival, especially from youth in the global South, who are prepared to care and fight for our planet. We know about the power to hurt one another. We also know about the power to heal and love. Given that our theme for this month is focused on answering the question of what it means to be a people of imagination, these are my closing words, coming back to power, from Eric Liu. Imagination, he writes, especially in times of crisis, must be coupled with the practice of power. For it is only the practice of power that can make the imagined real. Let it be so, and amen.
Please join us in singing hymn number 131, Love Will Guide Us. Love will guide us, peace is guide us, hope inside us, will lead the way on the road from greed to giving. Love will guide us through the hard night. If you cannot sing like angels, if you cannot speak for thousands, you can give from deep within you. You can change the world with your love. Love will guide us, peace has guide us, hope inside us will lead the way on the road from greed to giving. Love will guide us through the hard night.
Many thanks to Jim and Myra for leading our hymns this week. You too can lead hymns, so feel free to reach out to Carl Kennedy if you would like to do so. At this time, I invite you to rest your hands on your heart or clasp hands with those you're sharing space with these days and hear these words of benediction from Dr. King. Now we've got to get this thing right. What is needed is a realization that power without love is reckless and abusive, and that love without power is sentimental and anemic. Power at its best is love implementing the demands of justice, and justice at its best is love correcting everything that stands against love. May we follow in that path of righteousness, of building power and creating and sharing love. Go in peace.